This was vengeance, sharpened into steel. 10,000 Spartans marching with one purpose: to erase the humiliation of Thermopylae and blood. They came like a storm, their shields darkening the horizon, their spears like a forest of death. For the men of Xerxes, it was not a battle, it was a reckoning. This is where the empire that claimed to own the world was dragged into the dirt by warriors who refused to kneel. This is the day Thermopylae was avenged. This is Sparta's darkest roar.
The earth trembles beneath 10,000 boots. Shields clash in rhythm, spears rattle like a forest caught in a storm. A wall of bronze advances, endless and unstoppable, stretching across the horizon. The men who march wear no fear. They carry only fury, fury born from betrayal, from slaughter, from the blackened memory of Thermopylae. The Persians had believed Greece broken. At Thermopylae, the 300 Spartans who stood in that narrow pass had been crushed, their king Leonidas slain, their bodies left to rot in the dust. Xerxes, lord of the greatest empire the world had ever seen, paraded their defeat as proof that even the proudest warriors could be trampled beneath the boots of Persia. But in Sparta, grief does not breed surrender. It breeds vengeance. And vengeance is marching. The battlefield lies ahead, fields scorched by fire, villages reduced to ash, and streams swollen with corpses. Europe has never seen war like this. It is not kings alone who pay the price, but farmers, shepherds, mothers, and children. In every town that Persia touched, the black smoke of conquest hangs like a shroud. For the Spartans, this is no ordinary war. This is survival, survival of their city, their way of life, their honor. The air stinks of burning grain and rotting flesh. The sound of crows circles overhead, their cries mingling with the muffled beat of drums. The Persians, camped on the far side of the plain, look across the distance and see the rising dust of 10,000 advancing Spartans. They remember the narrow pass at Thermopylae, where a handful of men held their empire at bay for days. They remember how much it cost them to win. And now they see not 300, but 10,000. The silence before the storm is unbearable. A single gust of wind rolls over the field, carrying with it the acrid tang of gunpowder from Persian cannon, the metallic taste of blood already shed in skirmishes along the road. Spartan soldiers tighten the straps of their breastplates, spit into the dirt, and stare ahead with eyes hard as stone. They know this march is not for glory. It is for the dead, for Leonidas, for their brothers left unburied, for the insult carved into their pride. A veteran of Thermopylae, his body scarred and his beard gray, whispers to the young beside him, "Today we pay the debt." The boy says nothing, but grips his spear until his knuckles whiten. Across the plain, Persian war horns sound. Their lines stir like a serpent uncoiling, banners snapping in the wind. This is an empire that stretches from India to the Aegean, an empire of endless resources, endless men, endless arrogance. To Xerxes, this is another battle. To Sparta, this is everything. And in that contrast lies the terror of what is about to unfold. For when 10,000 Spartans march for vengeance, there can be no compromise, no retreat, no survival for those who stand in their way. The clash is coming. The ground is already soaked with the anticipation of blood. History will remember what happens here not as a battle, but as a reckoning. This is where the roar of Sparta answers the silence of Thermopylae. The year is 480 BCE. The Mediterranean world is a chessboard of empires, kingdoms, and fragile alliances. On one side lies Persia, the greatest empire the world has ever known. Stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, from the mountains of Central Asia to the deserts of Egypt, it commands the lives of millions. To its king, Xerxes, the great king, the world itself seems a possession, a crown resting on his brow by divine right. To the Greeks, Persia is not merely powerful. It is overwhelming. The empire's armies march in numbers that seem endless, swallowing nations, burning cities, enslaving peoples. Its fleet dominates the seas. When Persia moves, the earth shakes. And yet, on the other side of the Aegean, in a land broken not into empire but into city-states, lies Greece, a mosaic of rival powers, each jealous of the other, each unwilling to kneel. Athens, the restless naval power, looks to the sea and the wealth of trade. Sparta, the iron fist of the Peloponnese, trains every son to fight, every daughter to endure, every life for the polis. Corinth, Thebes, Argos, each city carries its own ambitions, its own rivalries. In peace, they quarrel more with each other than with any outside enemy. But when the Persians come, even the Greeks sense that their feuds are small compared to what waits across the sea. For Persia has come before. A decade earlier, King Darius sent his armies west to punish Athens for its support of Ionian rebels. At Marathon, the Athenians met them, and against all odds, they triumphed. The victory sent shockwaves across Greece, but it also stoked the fury of Persia. Darius swore vengeance, but death claimed him before he could carry it out. His son, Xerxes, inherited not just the empire but the oath of revenge. And Xerxes does not forgive. By 480 BCE, the preparations are vast. Across the empire, from Babylon to Egypt, tribute flows into Persian coffers. Men are conscripted in their tens of thousands. Ships are built, weapons forged, grain stockpiled. Xerxes means not just to punish Greece, he means to erase it. For him, the small, fractious cities of the Aegean are an insult to the majesty of Persia, a collection of gnats daring to sting the lion. His answer will be annihilation. And yet, inside Greece, life continues in uneasy normalcy. A farmer in Attica tills his field beneath the late summer sun. His thoughts are not of Xerxes, but of rain, harvest, and the taxes owed to the city. A potter in Corinth shapes clay with calloused hands, hoping his wares will fetch a few extra drachmas in the agora. A child in Sparta runs barefoot through the dust, his training just beginning, his life already pledged to the city. To these people, Persia is a rumor, a shadow across the sea. Marathon proved that the barbarians could be beaten. What danger could remain? But in the courts of kings and councils of generals, the shadow looms larger. Messengers bring word of an army so vast it drinks rivers dry, of a fleet that darkens the horizon. Whispers spread in the smoky halls of Athens that Xerxes means to crush them utterly. In Sparta, the kings debate, the ephors weigh omens, and the people remember an ancient prophecy, that Sparta must lose a king to save Greece. The Greek world teeters between defiance and fear. Some cities prepare to resist. Others lean toward submission, sending earth and water to Xerxes as symbols of obedience. Still others remain undecided, waiting to see where fortune will fall. Alliances form and dissolve in the space of a season. Trust is rare, betrayal common. This is the world before Thermopylae. A world where one empire prepares to smother a people who refuse to kneel. A world where ordinary men and women cling to life as usual, unaware that within months their farms may burn, their temples may fall, their children may be enslaved. For the Persians march not for conquest alone, but for vengeance. And the Greeks, divided, fragile, proud, do not yet know that their survival will depend on holding a narrow pass against impossible odds. But one decision would change everything. As one Athenian was said to remark when told of Xerxes' countless soldiers, "If the Persians are so many, perhaps they will block out the sun." To which a Spartan replied, without a trace of fear, "Good. Then we shall fight in the shade." Picture this. Asia, 481 BCE. In the royal courts of Persepolis, Xerxes, son of Darius, prepares to finish what his father began. 10 years earlier, the Persians had been humiliated at Marathon, their armies driven back by outnumbered Athenians. That memory is a thorn in Xerxes' side, a wound to the pride of an empire that claimed to rule the world. He will not let it stand. The decision is made: Greece will burn. Messengers gallop across the empire, carrying the great king's command. From India, Bactria, Egypt, Lydia, Babylon, and beyond, tribute and soldiers pour into Persia's coffers. Smiths hammer weapons day and night. Shipwrights bend planks into warships by the hundreds. Granaries groan with grain, destined to feed the largest army the world has ever seen. Ancient chroniclers would claim Xerxes gathered more than 2 million men, an ocean of soldiers drawn from every land under Persian control. In truth, the numbers were likely far smaller, yet still staggering for the time. Perhaps 200,000 soldiers and a fleet of over 1,000 ships. Even at the most conservative estimates, Greece had never faced such power. But Xerxes' war was not just about vengeance. It was about theater. When he crossed the Hellespont, he built not one but 2 massive pontoon bridges to span the strait between Asia and Europe. When a storm destroyed the first, he lashed the sea itself with whips, as if to punish it for defying him. He carved canals through mountains to let his fleet pass unimpeded. His march into Greece was meant not merely as conquest, but as a spectacle, a display of godlike power. Across the Aegean, the news spread like wildfire. In Athens, panic gripped the city. Some argued to submit, to offer earth and water, the symbols of obedience to Persia. Others called for resistance, remembering the glory of Marathon. Themistocles, cunning and relentless, urged his fellow citizens to put their faith not in walls, but in ships. He envisioned a fleet that could challenge Persia at sea, and he fought to turn Athens into a naval power that could save Greece. In Sparta, the reaction was colder, but no less grim. The Persians would come, and the Spartans would meet them. They had no illusions of safety. They knew the cost of defiance. And yet, to a people raised from birth to fight, to kill, to die for their city, no cost was too high. But not all of Greece was united. Some cities leaned toward Persia, hoping submission would preserve their wealth. Others hesitated, calculating where fortune might fall. Greek politics was a labyrinth of suspicion and betrayal, and the Persians were adept at exploiting it. Gold flowed into the hands of traitors and opportunists. Alliances broke as quickly as they formed. And yet, amidst this chaos, a council of Greek states met, the Hellenic League. Sparta took command of land forces, Athens of the sea. Their plan was desperate, their resources thin, but they understood one truth: if they did not stand together, they would be crushed one by one. Still, there remained the question, where to resist. The Persians were too many to face in open plains. The Greeks needed ground where numbers meant little, where skill and discipline could overcome overwhelming force. And so, their eyes turned north, to a narrow pass between mountain and sea. A place where the earth itself could fight alongside them. A place called Thermopylae. But this was no ordinary gamble. The oracle at Delphi had spoken, her voice shrouded in doom. O ye men who dwell in Sparta's mighty town, either your glorious city shall be sacked by Perseus' sons, or if not that, then all Laconia's boundaries shall mourn a dead king of Heracles' line. The message was clear. Sparta could be saved only by the death of one of its kings. And so, in the summer of 480 BCE, Leonidas, warrior king of Sparta, gathered 300 of his best men. With them, he marched north to Thermopylae, not to win, but to hold, to bleed the Persians, to give Greece time. They knew the prophecy. They knew the cost. And still, they went. The spark had been struck. Xerxes had unleashed his storm. Greece was preparing its stand. And in the shadow of Thermopylae, the world waited for the roar of battle. The Persians marched like a tide that could not be stopped. But in a narrow pass, hemmed in by mountain and sea, 300 Spartans waited. And when the storm broke, history would be written in blood. The summer of 480 BCE. Xerxes' army moves like an ocean of men. From the mountains of Persia, from the deserts of Egypt, from the steppes of Central Asia, they come, tens of thousands, bound together under the banner of the great king. Their march shakes the earth. Chroniclers would claim that when they drank, rivers ran dry. When they ate, the fields of nations were stripped bare. Whether myth or fact, one truth remains: no host of this size had ever been seen in the West. The great king himself travels in splendor. Xerxes rides at the center of the column, his chariot gleaming with gold, his attendants shading him beneath a canopy. Around him, the immortals, Persia's elite guard, 10,000 strong, march in perfect silence, their spears tipped with silver, their armor glittering in the sun. To his enemies, their very name is terror. When one immortal falls, another immediately takes his place, so their number is eternal. Yet even as the Persians advance with ceremony, their war is ruthless. Villages in their path are seized, livestock taken, men forced to serve, women enslaved. Smoke trails behind them like a scar across the land. To Xerxes, this is not cruelty, it is inevitability. The empire consumes what it touches. Resistance is folly. And yet, resistance has gathered. At Thermopylae, Leonidas has arrived. He brings with him his chosen 300 Spartans, warriors each with sons of their own, chosen so their lineage would endure even if they died. Beside them stand allies from Thespiae, Thebes, and other Greek cities, swelling their number to perhaps 7,000. Compared to Persia's sea of men, it is nothing. But to Leonidas, the pass itself is a weapon. Thermopylae, the hot gates. A narrow strip of land, wedged between mountain and sea. At its narrowest, scarcely wide enough for a chariot. Here, numbers mean little. Here, discipline, training, and courage can break an army. For Leonidas, it is the only place Greece can stand. The Greeks prepare their defenses. Spears are sharpened, shields polished, helmets fitted. Stones are piled to strengthen the wall at the narrowest point. The Spartans drill endlessly, their movements as fluid as water, their lines as unyielding as iron. At night, fires flicker against the cliffs, the glow of men who know death walks beside them. The Persians arrive in waves. Scouts bring word to Xerxes of a handful of Greeks barring the pass. He laughs. Surely these are fools, a token garrison, easily swept aside. Yet the longer he waits, the more reports disturb him. These men are Spartans. And Spartans do not yield. On the first day, Xerxes tests them. He sends in the Medes and the Scythians, infantry from the empire's vast provinces. They charge into the pass, their war cries echoing against the cliffs. But the Spartans stand unmoved. Shields lock. Spears thrust. The narrow walls turn Persia's numbers into chaos. Soldiers stumble over the bodies of their comrades, arrows darken the sky only to glance off bronze. The Greeks fight in perfect rhythm, their phalanx advancing and retreating like a single living thing. Persian dead pile high. Blood runs in the dust. Still they come. Still they fall. Frustrated, Xerxes unleashes his immortals. 10,000 of his finest, their faces masked, their armor gleaming. Surely they will break the pass. The charge comes like thunder. But the Spartans have chosen their ground well. In the choke of the pass, even the immortals lose their advantage. Greek shields press forward, spears strike from behind the wall of bronze, discipline against raw force. By nightfall, the immortals have withdrawn, their myth of invincibility shattered. The pass is littered with Persian bodies, the cries of the dying mingling with the stench of blood and sweat. Across the field, Xerxes watches in fury. His empire has been mocked by a handful of men. The greatest army in the world stalled by a narrow strip of earth. To his generals, he swears the Greeks will be ground to dust, no matter the cost. Yet within the Spartan camp, the mood is not triumphant. Leonidas knows the truth, they cannot hold forever. They have won a day, perhaps two, but time is all they can buy. Each sunrise brings more Persians. Each night brings fewer Greeks. The prophecy weighs heavy. One king must die. And so the second day begins. Again the Persians charge, and again they are slaughtered. The Greeks fight with precision, feigning retreat, then wheeling back in deadly ambush. Spears break, swords flash, shields splinter, but still the line holds. The pass becomes a charnel ground, soaked in blood, echoing with the clash of iron and the screams of men. For the ordinary soldier, Persian or Greek, it is a nightmare without end. Letters home will never be written. Names will never be remembered. Only the earth itself, black with ash and blood, will carry their story. And yet, somewhere in the shadows, betrayal stirs. A Greek named Ephialtes, driven by greed, has come to Xerxes with a secret. There is another path, he whispers. A mountain trail, winding above the pass, by which the Persians may flank the defenders. Xerxes listens. His eyes narrow. The tide of war is about to turn. The fire has been lit. The pass is burning. The Greeks have bled the empire, but now the jaws of betrayal are about to close. By dawn, the Persians would not come from the front alone. They would come from behind. And the Spartans would face not just an army, but doom itself. The night is quiet in the Spartan camp, but no man sleeps. They know what waits with the dawn. Whispers pass from shield to shield, from fire to fire, the Persians have found another path. A traitor named Ephialtes has led them through the mountains. Soon, the Greeks at Thermopylae will be surrounded. For Leonidas, there is no surprise. The prophecy has always been clear. Either Sparta must lose a king, or Greece must fall. He gathers his men and tells them the truth. They will not all die. He orders the bulk of the allied Greeks to withdraw. The Thespians alone refuse, choosing to stand beside Sparta to the end. The rest march away, carrying word of the sacrifice to their cities. But Leonidas and his 300 remain. They will not retreat. They will hold the pass until the last breath is torn from their bodies. For them, honor demands nothing less. The dawn breaks. From the mountains above, the first Persian troops descend, tens of thousands, winding down the goat path like a river of steel. From the plain, Xerxes' main army advances once more. The Greeks are caught in the jaws of the empire. And still, they fight. The Persians charge the pass, confident that this time their numbers will finally tell. But the Spartans meet them with fury sharpened by inevitability. Shields crash, spears thrust, bronze armor glitters red with blood. Leonidas himself fights in the front line, his blade flashing, his voice carrying above the din. He does not command from behind, he dies beside his men. Hour after hour, the Persians throw themselves into the narrow pass. The Greeks cut them down in heaps. Spears break, swords are drawn. The fighting becomes hand to hand, men grappling in the dust, choking on blood and sweat. The sun climbs high, and still the Spartans stand. But then the trap closes. From the mountains, the Persian flank emerges, crashing into the rear of the defenders. The Greeks are surrounded. The wall of shields begins to buckle. The earth itself seems to shudder beneath the weight of so many men, so much blood. It is then that Leonidas falls. Accounts differ, some say pierced by arrows, others that he was struck down in the press of battle. But all agree, the king of Sparta dies fighting, his body surrounded by his men. A frenzy erupts around his corpse. The Spartans fight like madmen to protect his body, dragging it back, defending it with their lives. Even in death, Leonidas is a standard they will not surrender. The Persians press harder. The air is thick with smoke and screams. The Spartans, their numbers dwindling, form a final ring of shields around the body of their king. They fight with broken weapons, with hands, with teeth. Every moment they live, they deny Xerxes the quick victory he craves. Finally, the Persians overwhelm them. Arrows darken the sky. The last Spartans are cut down where they stand, refusing to yield even as their shields shatter and their swords snap. When the dust settles, not one of Leonidas' chosen remains alive. The pass is lost. But the sacrifice is complete. Xerxes orders Leonidas' body mutilated, his head mounted on a spear, a rare act of rage from a king who usually respected courage. To him, this defiance has been too costly, too humiliating. For though Thermopylae is a Persian victory, it is a victory drenched in blood. By some accounts, tens of thousands of Persians lie dead for every Spartan who fell. The empire has won the pass, but it has not broken Greece. News spread swiftly across the land. To some, it is despair, the great wall of Sparta has fallen, the Persians march south. Cities burn. Athens will soon be abandoned, its people fleeing to the islands, its temples left to Persian fire. But to others, the sacrifice at Thermopylae becomes legend. The 300 who died have shown the world that Persia is not invincible, that courage, discipline, and unity can defy an empire. For Xerxes, the road to Athens lies open. For Greece, the time bought at Thermopylae will prove priceless. Ships gather, allies rally, and the spirit of defiance hardens into resolve. The sacrifice of Leonidas has lit a fire that will burn long after his bones are dust. And yet, beneath the glory, the cost is staggering. The pass is a graveyard. Corpses rot in heaps, vultures will in the smoke, and the ground itself is black with blood. Farmers returning months later will still find bones among the stones. Thermopylae is no longer a place of healing springs. It is a scar. But it is also a message. To Persia, that no victory comes without blood. To Greece, that freedom is worth death. To history, that sometimes the earth remembers not the conquerors, but the men who stood, fought, and fell. This is the blood in the earth. This is Thermopylae. The Persians had broken the pass, but not the Greek spirit. Ahead lay Salamis, Plataea, and a war that would decide the future of Europe. And Sparta was not finished yet. The pass at Thermopylae had fallen. Leonidas and his men were dead. Xerxes marched south, burning as he went. Athens was abandoned, its people fleeing to the safety of the islands. The Acropolis, once the pride of Greece, was left to Persian flames. Temples toppled. Statues shattered. For the empire, it seemed the war was already won. But Greece was not finished. Even in defeat, Thermopylae had bought something more precious than victory: time. Time for the Greek fleet to gather, time for strategy to sharpen, time for defiance to harden into resolve. That time would now bear fruit. Athens' leader, Themistocles, had gambled everything on the sea. While Sparta fought with spear and shield, Athens had built ships, sleek triremes, fast and deadly, designed to turn the narrow straits into killing grounds. His vision was clear: Greece could not match Persia's numbers on land. But at sea, in the twisting channels of the Aegean, discipline and cunning could outmatch the weight of empire. Xerxes believed otherwise. His fleet was vast, drawn from Phoenicia, Egypt, and Ionia, thousands of ships, an armada so immense it seemed to cover the waters like a forest of masts. He marched his armies to the shore, building a throne upon the cliffs of Salamis to watch what he believed would be the destruction of Athens' fleet. In his mind, victory was certain. Themistocles thought otherwise. In the dark of night, he sent a messenger to Xerxes with a lie, that the Greeks were divided, that they planned to slip away, that if the Persians struck quickly, they would catch their enemies in disarray. Xerxes, blinded by arrogance, took the bait. At dawn, his ships rode into the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland, crowding into channels too tight for their numbers. And there the Greeks waited. The battle began with the clash of bronze rams against hulls. Persian ships, packed too tightly, could not maneuver. Greek triremes, lighter and swifter, darted forward, striking from the flanks, retreating into the narrows, turning the enemy's size into chaos. Themistocles' gamble worked. The straits themselves became weapons. From his throne, Xerxes watched as his proud fleet was broken apart. Ships splintered, oars shattered, men drowned as the sea swallowed them. Greek war cries rose above the din, echoing against the cliffs. What Xerxes had thought would be a spectacle of triumph became a theater of disaster. By nightfall, the Persian fleet was shattered. Hundreds of ships lay wrecked or sunk. Thousands of sailors were dead. The sea was slick with oil and blood. And for the first time, the empire of Persia had been humbled. Salamis was not the end of the war, but it was the turning point. Without control of the sea, Xerxes could not feed his massive army. Supplies faltered. Morale weakened. Though he left a force behind in Greece, the great king himself withdrew, retreating across the Hellespont in humiliation. The empire had tasted something it had not known in generations: defeat. And in Greece, hope surged. The sacrifice at Thermopylae had not been in vain. Leonidas and his 300 had given their lives to buy the chance that Themistocles now seized. From despair, victory had been born. But Persia was not yet broken. In the years to come, battles would rage again, at Plataea, at Mycale, where Spartan spears and Athenian ships would finish what Thermopylae had begun. For now, though, the tide had turned. The greatest empire in the world had been checked, not by kings and dynasties, but by courage, cunning, and sacrifice. The sea had saved Greece, but the war was not yet over. On the plains of Plataea, Sparta would rise once more, and the blood of thousands would decide the fate of empires. Thermopylae was lost. Athens had burned. Xerxes had marched through Greece with fire in his hands and humiliation in his heart. And yet, the empire had not triumphed. The Persian king had expected Greece to collapse like a cracked vase, shattering at the first blow. Instead, the sacrifice of Leonidas had lit a fire across the land. City-states that once feuded now rallied. Themistocles' fleet had shattered Persia at Salamis. And though Xerxes had fled back across the Hellespont, leaving his general Mardonius behind with a massive army, the tide was already turning. For the Greeks, the year that followed was one of desperation. Fields burned, villages emptied, men armed with whatever they could carry. But hope did not die. Hope hardened. The Spartans, sworn to avenge their king, gathered allies. Athenians returned from exile to rebuild their ruined city. Across the land, men spoke of one last stand, not in a narrow pass, not at sea, but on the open plains where Greece would gamble everything. That place was Plataea. In the summer of 479 BCE, Mardonius led his Persian host into Boeotia, seeking to force Greece to its knees. Perhaps 70,000 Persians stood beneath his banner, cavalry swift as lightning, infantry drawn from every corner of the empire. Against them, nearly 40,000 Greeks gathered, Spartans, Athenians, Corinthians, and more, united for the first time in memory. The two armies faced one another across the Esopus River. For days they skirmished, testing the lines, cutting off water supplies, choking the Greeks in the heat of summer. Hunger gnawed, thirst burned. Mistrust brewed among allies. The fragile union of Greece wavered, as it always had, between courage and collapse. But when the moment came, the Spartans stepped forward. Mardonius hurled his cavalry across the plain, hoofs shaking the earth. Arrows hissed through the sky. But the hoplites, shields interlocked, spears leveled, held their ground. The Persians surged again and again, only to break upon the wall of bronze. In the chaos of battle, Mardonius himself fell, struck down by a Spartan spear. His death rippled through the Persian lines like lightning. Discipline shattered. What had begun as assault became panic. The Greeks pressed forward, slaughtering without mercy, driving the Persians from the field. Plataea was annihilation. The Persian camp, filled with silks and gold, was stormed and looted. The once proud army of Xerxes was broken, scattered, fleeing in terror. Of the empire that had promised to erase Greece, little remained but corpses in the dust. For Xerxes' dream of Europe, this was collapse. The great empire had spent men, ships, and treasure in floods, and gained only ash. The myth of Persian invincibility, born of centuries of conquest, now lay buried beneath Spartan spears and Athenian triremes. And for Greece, though the scars were deep, survival was victory. From the blood of Thermopylae and the flames of Athens, a new idea had been born, that free cities, if united, could defy kings who claimed to own the world. Yet even in triumph, the cost was written everywhere. Villages abandoned, fathers and sons buried side by side, widows and orphans wandering roads that stank of death. The soil itself seemed to drink blood. The war had ended Persia's invasion, but it had also carved wounds that would never heal. When told of the Persian rout, one Spartan supposedly remarked, "Strange, so many Persians, yet so few left to bury them." The empire had collapsed, but the story of Greece was only beginning. For in victory lay seeds of new wars, new rivalries, and a legacy that would shape the very future of the West. The year is 479 BCE. The Persian dream of conquering Greece lies in ruins. At Plataea, Mardonius has fallen. At Mycale, the Persian fleet has been shattered. What remains of Xerxes' vast invasion force retreats across the Hellespont, limping home in disgrace. The empire still sprawls across continents, still commands endless wealth and men. But one thing has been broken forever, the myth of Persian invincibility. Greece breathes. Yet the air is heavy, filled not with triumph, but with smoke and grief. The land itself bears the scars of war. Fields that once fed villages are blackened. Temples that once rang with prayer stand in ruins. Athens is a charred skeleton, its Acropolis desecrated, its citizens scattered. Sparta mourns its king, Leonidas, whose bones will one day be returned home in honor. Across the Peloponnese and Attica, mothers grieve sons who will never return, children grow up knowing their fathers only through stories whispered at the hearth. And yet, out of this ruin, legend rises. Thermopylae is remembered not as defeat, but as defiance. 300 Spartans, standing against the flood of empire, holding the line until the last man fell. Their sacrifice became more than an act of war, it became a symbol of freedom, of duty, of courage stronger than fear. The victories that followed, Salamis, Plataea, Mycale, owed everything to that stand. Without the time they bought, without the example they set, Greece would not have held. It was their blood that carved the path to survival. Politically, the war reshaped Greece. Athens, its fleet triumphant, now looked outward, envisioning an empire of its own. Sparta, its land armies unmatched, saw itself as guardian of Hellenic order. Rivalries would soon grow, seeds of new wars sown even in the soil of victory. But for the moment, unity had saved them. For the moment, Greece had defied the greatest power on earth. In the years to come, poets and chroniclers would immortalize the fallen. Herodotus, Simonides, and countless others would etch their names into history. The words inscribed at Thermopylae still echo across centuries. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. It is an epitaph not only of Sparta, but of the eternal cost of freedom. Yet even in solemn remembrance, the Spartans did not lose their sharpness of tongue. When asked why they had stayed to die at Thermopylae, one Spartan was said to reply with a grin, because running would have been far more tiring. The ashes of Thermopylae gave birth not only to Greek victory, but to an idea that courage and sacrifice could bend the arc of history itself. Yet what Greece won on the battlefield, it would soon risk losing to rivalry, ambition, and war among its own. The roar of battle fades. The fires of Salamis and Plataea burn low. The bones of the 300 lie buried in foreign soil, their names etched in stone, their story carried on the lips of poets. But Thermopylae was never only about one pass, or one battle, or even one war. It was about something greater, a mirror held to the world, showing what men become when faced with the impossible. The Persians had come with endless numbers, with the wealth of continents, with kings who claimed to rule by divine right. Yet in the narrow throat of Thermopylae, they were stopped by men who carried nothing but bronze and will. The lesson was clear: strength of arms can conquer, but strength of spirit endures. To Greece, Thermopylae was proof that freedom could outlast empire. To Persia, it was a reminder that no power, no matter how vast, could crush defiance forever. To history, it became a legend, retold across centuries as the measure of courage. Like the 30 Years' War in Europe, it revealed truths hidden beneath banners and crowns. Xerxes marched for glory, for vengeance, for conquest. The Greeks stood for survival, for their cities, for their children. And when the dust settled, it was not the conqueror's throne that endured, but the memory of those who fell refusing to bow. Philosophers would later reflect that Thermopylae showed the fragile line between order and chaos, between empire and liberty. It proved that sometimes the fate of nations rests not on numbers, but on the willingness of a few to stand when others flee. It also showed, brutally, undeniably, that victory is never without cost. The soil of Greece was soaked with that cost. Fields lay barren, villages ruined, families broken. The triumph of Plataea was born from sacrifice, not from triumphalism. And yet, the Greeks did not let that sacrifice become despair. They turned it into meaning. They carved it into memory. The epitaph at Thermopylae is simple. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. No speeches of glory. No boasts of victory. Only obedience, duty, and acceptance of death. And still, even amid this solemnity, the Spartans' humor endured. It is said that when Xerxes demanded the Greeks surrender their weapons, Leonidas replied with 2 words: "Come and take them." And when told that Persian arrows would blot out the sun, one Spartan grinned and answered, "Good. Then we shall fight in the shade." Even in the face of annihilation, they mocked the empire that sought to destroy them. Their humor was not lightness. It was defiance sharpened to a blade, a reminder that even death could be faced with laughter. Thermopylae matters because it proved that courage can outlive defeat. It matters because it showed that freedom, once kindled, cannot be easily extinguished. It matters because, like all great wars, it revealed the truth that ordinary people, not kings or generals, carry the burden of ambition. And it matters because its echo still speaks. In every age, when nations are threatened, when people face impossible odds, the shadow of Thermopylae rises again, a reminder that even a few, if unbroken, can change the course of history. The war ended with Persian retreat, with Greece scarred but unbowed. Yet the story of Thermopylae became more than history. It became a legend, a lesson, and a warning. Thermopylae was not simply a battle. It was a turning point, a passage from fear into defiance, from empire into freedom, from flesh into myth. As one poet later joked, the Spartans died at Thermopylae, but they had the satisfaction of making sure the Persians died in far greater numbers trying to kill them. Wars do not end on battlefields. They end in memory. And the memory of Thermopylae was carved into the soul of Greece, as the 30 Years' War was carved into Europe. The Persian Wars concluded with the collapse of Xerxes' dream. At Plataea and Mycale, the empire's armies were broken. The Hellespont, once spanned by the king's mighty bridges, was crossed only by retreat. The great king who had whipped the sea itself returned to Asia humbled, his ambitions drowned by Greek defiance. For Persia, the consequences were subtle but profound. The empire remained vast, wealthy, and formidable. It would endure for another century. But Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea exposed its limits. Persia could command nations, but it could not command free men united by desperation. It could punish, plunder, and destroy, but it could not erase the memory of defiance. For Greece, the legacy was both triumph and danger. United by necessity, the city-states had done what seemed impossible. They had faced the most powerful empire of the known world and survived. Sparta had proved its valor, Athens its vision, and together they had shown that courage and cunning could alter the balance of power. Yet unity was fragile. The same Athens that had once burned would soon rebuild into an empire of its own, its navy dominating the Aegean, its influence spreading across the islands and coasts. Sparta, wary and proud, resented the growing shadow of its rival. The Delian League, formed to guard against Persia, became an instrument of Athenian control. The seeds of the Peloponnesian War, Greece's own civil war, were sown in the soil of Persian defeat. Still, Thermopylae remained untouchable. Even as Greeks turned on each other, they remembered the 300. Their sacrifice stood above politics, above rivalry, as a reminder of what Greece had been when it was united, and what it could become again. Culturally, the battle echoed in poetry, drama, and memory. Herodotus, the father of history, immortalized it in his chronicles. Poets like Simonides gave it voice in epitaphs that distilled courage into a single breath. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. This was not romanticism. It was instruction. Thermopylae became the textbook of duty, obedience, and sacrifice. Generals studied it. Statesmen invoked it. Ordinary people remembered it when hardship came, when survival seemed impossible. Philosophically, Thermopylae shaped ideas of freedom and order. Just as Hobbes would later see the 30 Years' War and argue for the Leviathan, Greek thinkers saw the Persian Wars as proof that liberty required sacrifice. That tyranny, no matter how wealthy or powerful, could not erase men willing to die for their laws. From this crucible came not only the defense of Greece, but the flourishing of ideas in Athens. Democracy, philosophy, art, born in the shadow of survival. Its shadow reached further still. Centuries later, Rome would admire the Spartans, modeling its own martial discipline on their example. In the modern era, Thermopylae became a symbol invoked by nations facing impossible odds, by resistance fighters, by revolutionaries, by soldiers standing against empires. Whenever few stand against many, Thermopylae is recalled. Yet legend should not erase truth. The Spartans were not saints. They owned slaves, ruled harshly, and fought with ruthless discipline. Their courage was real, but it was born from a system of iron obedience. And still, their stand revealed something eternal, that the human spirit can make even death a weapon. This is the true legacy of Thermopylae. It ended not in Persian conquest, but in Greek survival. Not in triumph, but in exhaustion. And yet from its ashes rose a new world, one in which freedom, however fragile, could be defended by courage. When Persian envoys once asked why the Spartans refused to build city walls like other Greeks, a Spartan replied dryly, "We already have walls, they are called our sons." Even in legacy, the Spartans could not resist turning death and danger into wit. Thermopylae was not just a battle. It was a message carved into history, that even the greatest empires can bleed, that even the smallest nations can defy, and that sometimes the greatest victories are born in defeat. If this was how 300 men shook the world, what came next would shatter it. Subscribe, because the next story will leave you speechless.
What you just watched wasn't just history. It was a voice that refused to be forgotten. And there are so many more waiting to be heard. So if you felt something today, if the past reached out and touched you, then don't let it fade. Subscribe to Unique History Alive. And walk with us, one buried truth at a time. Because history isn't dead. It's just been waiting for someone like you.